to African Network Television. I'm Shamrock McShane. Today is Monday, November 3rd, 2014, and tomorrow is Election Day here in the USA. I'm here with Marihelen Wheeler. She's running for Congress. She's hoping to represent Florida's Congressional District 3, which presently comprises a large section of northernmost Florida, including the entire counties of Bradford, Columbia, Dixie, Gilchrist, Hamilton, Lafayette, Levy, Suwannee, and Union, along with the majority of Alachua and Clay counties, half of Madison County, and a section of Marion County. All of Lake City is in the district, and the western half of Gainesville, along with the western suburbs of Ocala. Marihelen is a teacher at Westwood Middle School here in Gainesville, where she has taught art and special ed for the past 20 years. She's been the Teacher of the Year at Westwood, and before that she taught for 10 years in Levy County, and she was Teacher of the Year there too. Marihelen grew up in rural Kentucky, farmland, and she's lived in rural Florida for the past 32 years. And so you know these people in District 3, don't you?
I do. I'm real comfortable with folks that live in this district because I grew up with them. And I found out that a lot of the people who live in this district actually, some years ago, decades ago, migrated from the parts of the country where I grew up too.
Ah, yes. And as your teaching experience has brought you in contact with a lot of families.
Absolutely. You know, I figure that's probably anywhere from 5,000 to 6,000 families that I've worked with over the 30 years that I've been in this district, and that's a lot of working families. So I feel like that I know the needs and concerns that are required by the family to provide, you know, for the health and well-being of their families.
Sure. Let me explain a little bit about our congressional system. There are 100 senators in the United States. That's 2 for each state. But the House of Representatives is based on the size of the population in each state. And there are 435 members of Congress right now. Florida has 27 representatives, which is a lot. It's as many as the state of New York, and only California and Texas have more. Our current representative is Ted Yoho, and his constituency is solidly Republican, and this is as the result of intentional gerrymandering, which is to say the good kind, because the idea is to make another district, District 5, which is currently represented by Corinne Brown, solidly Democratic, so things balance out. Now, Mr. Yoho defeated his Democratic challenger in the last election in 2012, J.R. Galliot, with 65% of the vote, but he had just narrowly defeated the incumbent, Mr. Cliff Stearns, who had held his seat in Congress for 24 years. So needless to say, Marihelen, you face an uphill challenge.
You know what? The gerrymandering is a word that is, I think it's a bullying tactic that keeps people out of the process. But when you look at the numbers, it's really not that badly gerrymandered. You know, it may be for the size of the district because of the 13 counties and the wide range of area that it covers. But if you look at the numbers, which we did before we got into this race, of this population, 38% are Democrats, 40 Republicans, and 22% are undecided.
Sure.
So it's pretty close in number, really, and it's just a matter of getting those folks out to vote.
That's right. It's usually a matter of the independent voters who are going to actually decide the election.
Yeah.
And their independence, you would think, might lead them to choose a candidate that might be more reasonable than what they've been seeing for the last couple of years.
Well, that's another reason we got into this race too. We felt like that Dr. Yoho was vulnerable in his first term because we know now what his voting record looks like. We know how he feels about certain issues, about civil rights and human rights and equal rights, and they have been counter to what many of my friends and people that I work with believe. And so not only are the Democrats unhappy, but there are a lot of Republicans also who feel like that he's gone to the extreme right, more towards the influence of the Tea Party, to the point where they've been embarrassed as well.
Well, when you go to Congress, the job there is to create legislation and pass legislation, but you seem to think that he's not really taking advantage of that opportunity because
No.
the legislation that he's supporting really doesn't have any chance of succeeding
No.
anyway.
Well, we're looking at this Congress as a big failure in the last 2 years. And one of the reasons is because of issues that Dr. Yo has been concerned with, like trying to impeach our president. He's going to be out of office in 2 years anyway, or trying to defeat the Affordable Care Act, which is a law.
It's already a
it's
law.
here, it's not going anywhere. So these folks have wasted a lot of time on issues that are irrelevant to our district here.
Sure.
And they have wasted concerns on women's health issues that are really not so much for the greater good as actually tackling things like immigration reform or human trafficking that, you know, I feel like the Congress has been pretty cowardly in hiding behind women's issues, you know, or hiding behind issues that are, like I say, irrelevant to our district, rather than tackle things like economy or immigration reform or actually improving the Health Care Act for us.
Well, let's talk about some of the issues and the kinds of legislation that might actually have a chance of succeeding. Being a teacher, and I was a teacher myself, let's talk about education and how Congress can actually have an impact on changing things for the better.
Well, I think Congress could have an impact by actually engaging the professionals who are the educators of this country. It's one of the most noble professions in the world historically, you know, and we used to be able to say with great pride, right, that we were teachers. Just like policemen could say with great pride.
That's right.
They serve
Saving
the
lives.
public. Yes,
Yeah.
we are public servants. But what they have done in Washington is support the corporations, I think, that are also supporting their own bottom profit line.
Sure.
In terms of the testing, we know that the testing that has turned us upside down in public education is a result of corporate greed.
Yes.
I can't help but blame Jeb Bush, our former governor, who was here, for turning this upside down for us and taking education out of the hands of the educators.
Well, now right here in Alachua County, the teachers have begun to rebel a little bit against this standardized testing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I think teachers are meant to be leaders,
Absolutely.
not followers.
Absolutely.
But what can be done instead of?
Okay, instead of, again, giving it back to the teachers in the the different regions of our country have different needs and different cultural, historic backgrounds that the children growing up in those regions know better than anybody. Now, if you try to standardize a test across the country, yes, we do want our kids to know things, but the things that we know in Florida, a child out in the desert may not need to know. And we also have to worry that not everybody wants to go to college, and that's what we're trying to do, is to feed the university corporation, which has become, you know, and we have our students that we are guiding all of them towards a college education because somehow we've made them feel that vocational work is beneath them, or working in the fields, the farms, is beneath them. And I grew up in a generation where they said if you didn't go to college, you know, and you were into digging ditches, well, now it's pretty much you'll be working in the fields.
Well, you know, no other country in the world really looks at public education the way the United States does. In fact, most other countries try to specialize their education, whereas in this country, everybody should have a chance.
Yes.
And I think that with the standardized testing, well, what's your take on the new Common Core?
Well, the Common Core, again, it's fine to try to have expectations for our students to have a basic understanding so they can support the democracy that we're trying to maintain.
Sure.
But in terms of having, again, the standardized tests going across the board, Common Core is got a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of misunderstanding. And again, it's not in the hands of the educators. Vocational education has gone by the wayside. And to actually compare us to countries like Finland or Germany or any of these countries that have these, Japan, China, have these high standards. You know, our country is very large and we've got a diverse population here. And to compare our country with someone like Finland, which is very small.
That's a stretch. Yeah.
It is a stretch. And then you have countries that track their children from middle school towards vocational or for academic. We try to channel all of our kids towards the academic. So we've got the universities who are giving out money to kids to go to school and then expecting them to pay
some
this back
return.
at a terrible,
yes, that's right.
a terrible percentage rate. And so we have children that are coming out of college with an education that they can't use to get a job.
Well, now that's certainly something Congress could do
Plus
something
the debt.
about.
That's exactly right. And if we could lower this loan rate, or or actually steer our children, our young people, or they're children to me. I'm 63 years old, but steer our young people into a profession where they could actually make a living.
Yes.
You know, when you have a youngster coming out with a master's degree in French literature, you know, those people are going to have a hard time finding a spot. And so maybe, and a lot of times it feels like predatory lending, as far as I'm concerned, when we
To
engage,
take in the college
yes,
students, yeah.
put them in a place like that.
Now, the conflict I see with Common Core is trying to reconcile the Constitution's idea that public education really belongs to the states. But at the same time, in Texas, if you read their new textbook, you're going to discover that the Earth is only 6,000 years old.
Yes, well, and that's a good point. And that's a good point. You know, we have to do what we do have to protect our citizens.
That there is
to make
some
yes.
national interest in
No,
education.
you're right. No, that's a good point. It is a good point. We just have to make sure that our children are getting well educated, and that they're getting, you know, I believe in classical education, and that's where I'm coming from, and I've worked in enough private schools to know that's what money
that's
pays
right.
for.
That's part of your background as well.
It is. I've worked in private boarding schools for boys and girls in New Haven, Connecticut, outside Yale Divinity School, you know, so I know what money will buy in terms of an education.
Well, and as an art teacher and
right.
teaching the most creative of students,
That's right.
and of course art is not testable.
That's right.
That's not going to be part of any standardized
Not
test.
yet. It's not. They're trying, but it's not yet. That's not yet. But, you know, again, we have our students that right now the standards keep getting higher and higher to the point where, you know, if I was to try to get a high school diploma right now and had to pass chemistry and physics and algebra 2, I'd have to pay somebody to take those tests for me. My brain is a right brain doing creative things, and to be that going to my left side, that would be a tough one for me. And there are a lot of students that I teach currently now that I know there is no way that those kids are going to be able to pass those tests. And what they're going to come out with then is a diploma of completion, and not a high school diploma. You know, so if you're going to go to all that trouble and blood, sweat, and tears in a high school program and still not be able to get a diploma, then what is the incentive to stay there?
Well, let's switch gears a little bit here and talk about the environment, because I know that's probably the way that you actually got into politics, through fighting for our water resources.
It is. I've been doing this for about 10 years, and I've worked with several different groups in the area. Our biggest success was turning the Silver Springs Park into a private park into a state park, so that more of us can enjoy it, and also protect that waterway. We in Florida are being assaulted on all sides. Georgia, the Gulf of Mexico with the oil drilling, and now with the offshore drilling, they're trying to get out on the shelf in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yes.
And also the Trans-Pacific project that is going to be coming through the Panama Canal, that dredging, the dredging in Miami, which is already destroying the corals.
Well, this
down
is
there.
a very fragile ecosystem and environment here in Florida. And now Mr. Yoho is in support of some things that would really be damaging.
No, he is. He's just had a report. We just got a letter through the email not too long ago where he'd been down to that port in Miami and was really lauding the success of having all that going on down there, that Florida is open for business. Our governor says so. Our congressional people, representatives say so. But at the same time, there are those of us who are actually living next to the ground and drinking the water and trying to pump the water out, are realizing that we're in big trouble. If we're not big business, then we're in trouble here in Florida.
Well, but it seems as though even big business would have to acknowledge at some point that climate change is real, and has to be dealt with.
You don't hear it much, though. I mean, to hear Yoho talk, that's not an issue he knows anything about or cares anything about. And this is.
We're going to be in the front line of climate change.
We sure are, because if you only have to look at California in the West right now and see that the drought that they're experiencing there is already driving food prices up, and the price of milk and meat at this point is high, and it's because of those global issues, the climate change, that we're going to have to be looking at Florida as well. We can't sustain large herds of beef anymore. Our grasslands won't take that, particularly in Florida, where we're pumping water out and putting fertilizers in. If you've ever tried to garden in Florida.
No. It's limestone and sand.
And sand, absolutely. And we are being attacked by the gas companies out of Oklahoma, Texas. We've got a gas pipeline we're trying to fight over in the western side right now, the Sable Trail. It's 36-inch liquefied gas that Duke Industry has already told us we don't need that gas in Florida. So
it's going somewhere else. It's for
somewhere else. We've got those ports we're dredging now for those big tankers to come in here and run that line through. But the thing about that is that what they don't tell us, and they're very careful not to tell us, how many of us have actually heard about the Trans-Pacific Project? Not many.
No.
And they're talking about dredging in the St. Johns River too, which over in Jacksonville. And all they talk about is jobs. But what they're not talking about is the citizens of Florida who are actually trying to live here and who are going to be affected. The environment is going to be terribly affected. Agriculture, aquaculture, ecotourism is what supports our economy. Of the mom and pop stores they keep trying to protect, those are the things that we depend on. And the water is the lifeblood of this area.
Oh, yes. Well, now, to talk about how gas is influencing things, we can switch over to a little discussion of transportation. And my favorite idea that has gone by the wayside was the train.
Oh, I'm with you. We have a train system here. It could be extended. It could be improved. I would like to see them if they're going to be doing the car, CESX, does a lot of transporting of some things that are pretty scary. I mean, if you watch some of those trains go by in the outlying areas, the chemicals that they're carrying on those things are pretty frightening. But again, I believe that the train system is the way to go. My son Jeremiah just got back from Europe, and one of the things he misses most is being able to get on that train and go.
I'll bet.
Not being able to walk or ride bikes the way that we're trying in Gainesville.
Have we just missed our opportunity for the high-speed rail? Because we turned it down,
We did turn it down. We did turn it down, and that was just so unfortunate.
Oh,
and it's amazing to me that one man could have that kind of power over
Well,
our
it would have
state.
solved so many problems with one stroke, it seemed like.
It would have, with the amount of tourists that fly into Jacksonville and Miami, to be able to link those two cities with the train and going into Orlando.
And give people jobs at the same time.
Absolutely. And places like Hawthorne, our little town of Hawthorne, is a beautiful site for renovation and restoration because there's a wonderful hub there where the rails come together. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not, but it's very interesting. Yeah. And if they could restore the little shops and build their persona around the train history here. Flagler's Trains is what opened Florida.
Like ready-made for Congress to do something about.
It would be. If we could get that money going and get capture the imagination of the locals to believe again in their own abilities to build their own communities with a little help from the outside. But first of all, the communities have to show that there's an interest and a will.
Well, now, similarly, we missed a chance to expand Medicaid. What can be done on the healthcare front?
Well, we just have to change our governor. And we have to make sure that the people in Washington are there fighting. People like me who are willing to go and say, look, we have a change of leadership now. We are ready to go forward with this, and we have people in our community who need this desperately. And we're willing to work with anybody we can to make sure that this is successful.
To make healthcare more accessible.
That's right.
And which would mean more jobs as well.
Absolutely.
And then conversely, Mr. Yoho is still, he still wants to get
Right.
rid of the Affordable Care Act.
Right, he does. You know what, and the difference is, in Yoho and me, the big difference as I see it, is Dr. Yoho works with families who can afford food and shelter and health care for their livestock.
Mm-hmm.
And I am trying to represent those people who can't afford those things for their families. And that changes your perspective
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot, and who you interact with a lot.
Sure, sure. And it's such an interesting contrast. Yes, Dr. Yoho is a veterinarian. He treats large animals,
Yes,
which means in this farm country that largely comprises this district, that seems a natural. But at the same time, you are a farm person.
I am. I raised tobacco with my grandfather when I was growing up too. But also, I grew up in an area where we had corn and soybeans and wheat. You know, and I'm in a farming community where the boys, by the age of 10, were driving their family tractors.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of responsibility going to young people working in these areas. And these are families that live very close to the ground. And, you know, those are the folks who don't have so far to fall. If you look at it that
Mhm.
way, you know, they're used to living on a budget, but at the same time, they shouldn't be living in poverty. And these people who are working so hard, working 40 hours a week, say, and still living below the poverty line, you know, there's
Oh,
something
yeah.
wrong with that.
Well, my wife works at Winn-Dixie, and I know for a fact that raising the minimum wage would make a big difference in the lives of a lot of people just like us.
Absolutely, it would. You know what? The economic recovery has really helped the 1%. If you look at the
Mhm.
charts, we're
Oh, my God.
flatlined. Now, the rest of us down here are flatlined. But that 1% up there is shot way up there. And the trickle down does not come from the top. I don't care what anybody says, it doesn't.
Mhm.
It comes from the middle. And those of us in the middle know what it means to take care of your families and your
Mhm.
neighbors and to share what you have.
Sure.
And those are the ones more willing to pay their taxes,
Mhm.
no matter how much it hurts. And we've got people in the 1% who can afford their tax lawyers and, you know, their financial advisors who help them avoid that.
Well, I was at one of your debates with Mr. Yoho, and now he had a counter to this. He said that he had just spoken to a small business owner that day, and that she had run the numbers, and that she had 17 employees, but if she were to have the minimum wage raised, she'd have to get rid of one of those employees. And what would you say to that one employee?
Hmm. Well, I would say to that one employee, well, that's a good question, but what I would say is to sacrifice one for the many. I mean, if this is going to raise this up, you know, we'll help you find another job.
Well, I think if you just step back and look at it in this perspective, that if that were to be the case,
Mhm.
and take his case study there, you could say to that one employee that no matter where else you get a job now, you're going to get a raise.
There, that's good. That's good. I like that. That's
Well,
good.
and that's
a better answer.
Well, and it's silly to think that the government is necessarily the enemy of small business.
No, absolutely.
Because Walmart's the enemy of small business.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, the small businesses should be pretty alarmed that these big corporations like this are there to be bailed out by the government,
Mm-hmm.
but the small businesses are not. So, but these are the very people also who say they don't want government interfering in their business.
That's right.
It's so they're really stuck, and there's a lot of misinformation, as a matter of fact. And so, I would say to these people who are trying to hire folks, hire less so that you can give more benefits to. Unlike Walmart, who is, you know, hiring more people,
Yes.
but 4 hours a day.
Sure,
For heaven's
sure.
sake, that's not worth the time to come into a business.
That's
Try to
right.
hire a babysitter for that amount of time and then leave out again. But you know, when the cost of milk is going up to $6 a gallon and you're only getting paid $7 an hour, you're really just working for food.
Mm-hmm. That's
And-
right.
And people who are receiving food stamps right now, there's a lot of complaints I hear, you know, from people who say that people sell their food stamps, drugs, alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
but you know what? Most of those people are selling those food stamps to get soap or diapers
Yes.
or
Yes.
you know,
Things that aren't covered by food
that's
stamps.
exactly
Sure.
right. You know, so we just need to look at these programs. Of course, we need to look at them. They're not all perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But we need people in Washington who are able to solve these problems rather than deal with women's health issues. You know, we're impeaching
Mhm.
the president or trying to
Yeah,
get rid
things
of
that
a
are
law.
going nowhere. Yeah.
Nowhere. And they can address the economy. Our economy is in trouble. We are in trouble, but it can be fixed, and it can be fixed now. We don't have to wait
Mhm.
for the next generation to take this on. Our generation, starting in the 60s and the 70s, started amazing revolutions.
Mhm.
It's time for us to pick that up again and finish it and not leave behind this mess that we created in the decades that we have been rising to power, rising to influence.
Well, to speak of that, here are a couple of issues that involve our African viewers and viewers of African descent. First of all, immigration. Um, Everybody says they're in favor of immigration reform, but at the same time, Congress seems to be the actual stumbling block to it.
It is. It is at this point. The groundwork was laid. It was presented through the Senate. I've been working on this for a couple of years with groups here in Florida. I was the district coordinator for CIR Now, Comprehensive Immigration Reform Now, and we were pressuring. My job was to pressure Yoho into action. There were others in different districts. Richard Nugent down in District 11, we were working down there trying to pressure these men to take action on behalf of the migrant workers that we have here in this state.
Oh, yes.
And we weren't able to move them. They really were. And I told Yoho then, I said, if we can't work with you, we'll work against you. And so that's where it's come to. The same as in District 11 down in Ocala. We have a lot of folks that are working here from the Americas, South Central America, and the Caribbean who are working in these areas here. And these folks need support because they are here working to support our economy, and we are not doing anything to protect them. And people like Yoho in Washington, like I say, have been so distracted by things that have nothing to do with our district that they have let the farmers and the farm workers down. And those of us who teach ESOL children in our schools, you know, we can't ask them if they're documented or not. We
That's
teach
right.
them. We teach them just like any other child
Sure.
in our classroom until they're 18 years old. So we have people who are welcomed from Europe. We have people who are welcomed from different countries who have skills, and they have a quick pathway to citizenship. But you know, those people who are picking peas in the fields are skilled workers too. We don't have many folks in our community who are willing to get out and do that in the heat of the sun, you know, for 10 hours a day. And so they are skilled workers. So we look at people from Haiti in a different way from people from Cuba. That Statue of Liberty that's up in New York, you know, is not on the border of Mexico. It's not in Miami, perhaps, and it's not on the border of Canada, even though the Canadians have an easier way of getting in and out here too. So this is a big issue that needs to be addressed. If you're a skilled worker with great credentials, you know, then we want you. If you are not, then we're going to make your life tough, even though we're willing to hire you.
That's right.
We will hire you.
That's right.
But we will not protect you.
The employers are at fault on that.
So human trafficking is a big issue in this country, and shame on us for that being so.
Well, now currently with the Ebola crisis, states have voiced their opinions on whether or not people should be coming into this country or going to Africa to help, which seems to me to be the only solution to any kind of a crisis like this.
Right. Well, I've been watching the news on this one too, and we've watched that the areas where we've sent our young military in there, bless their hearts, my goodness, we send them into every awful place we can think of, you know, a dangerous situation. If it's not the Middle East, then it's a place where there's a disease. But anywhere we have sent these people, we're realizing that the disease is being stabilized. And so we have real heroes that are out there working to try to help make sure that this stabilizes. I think the CDC is doing a good job. I think they have kept the hysteria down. I feel really badly that our politicians have blown this up
As
to
an
such
opportunity.
an issue. As an
Yes.
opportunity, when we have people dying, and I just feel like that it's a real shame that we used a situation like this for our own political gain. I feel like the CDC is doing a good job. We have 4 cases in this country, and we are trying to help our friends and the African nations that are dealing with this thing in the best way we can.
It just seems like a much more effective fight for humanity to fight Ebola than to be fighting other people.
Yes. I mean, that would be the case for the UN, wouldn't it? And for our young soldiers.
Which brings to mind, Mr. Yoho wants us out of the UN.
And you know what? I've not been to New York much, but the last time that I was there, the most exciting place for me to be was in the UN, with people from all over the world working for the betterment of all of us as a human species, you know?
Oh, yes.
Because it's real easy to see the negative and the meanness and the hatred in the world. Oh my goodness. I don't think I've seen anything like this in my 63 years of being alive. But that attitude needs to come from the top. And if it comes from the world leaders of us, humanity, addressing the needs of humanity, sending our young people who we have raised in a culture of caring and love, the churches and the schools that raised our children raised in small communities to go, you know, where we are learned to nurture each other, then to send them out in the world and give them a gun and say, okay, now it's okay to kill.
Yes.
And then bring them home again and say, okay, now it's not okay to kill.
Yes.
I think we've prepared our young people better to go out into the world to help it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I remember seeing an interview with Walter Dean Myers, the great young adult novelist, and he was talking about the military and how so many black people ended up in the military. And he said, well, I understand their predicament because they can't get a job. And here we're going to offer you 3 meals a day and a place to sleep, and we know you're pissed off, so we're going to let you shoot some people too. So I think this idea of the military fighting Ebola is a noble thing.
It is, and hopefully we'll treat them as the noblemen and women that they are when they try to come home, unlike the little nurses and the doctors that we have
locked up.
Oh my goodness!
We locked them up.
Well, and again, that just shows the hysteria that can be fanned by publicity and by opportunity, such as an election. But, you know, the African nations that we are watching right now, they're dealing with a whole lot of, they're being impacted too by a lot of social issues. And I've watched this with great concern because as a woman, I'm very keenly aware of the way that women and children are often used as pawns of war.
Yes.
And to see what's happened with these young schoolgirls now that were abducted from their schools, taken by this group of just evil people. I mean, they are even more evil than to say terrorists. You know, there's got to be a word above terrorism. These people are just evil. And to take these young women and marry them off from their families so never to be seen again.
Yes, and disappear, and then they disappear.
Again, women and children are soft targets. And in the Middle East, where they're being just shot down, I think we need more women in government. I really do, because I think if women were in government handling these issues of inhumanity, that somebody would be getting spankings. That's what I mean. Getting somehow the idea that women who suffer the most loss, family members, watching their children cut down, watching their husbands and their brothers and their parents cut down, and then being sold into slavery themselves. You know, these issues need to be dealt with by women who understand those issues keenly.
Well, we've got just a minute or two left, and tomorrow is Election Day. I know a lot of people have probably already voted. We have early voting, and some people have done an absentee ballot. But what can we expect for the voter turnout tomorrow?
I have no clue. This is going to be a real, it's going to be a surprise to me one way or another, I think, because in our campaign we haven't had the money to do the polling to understand. I don't always believe what the press says, what the polls that put out there are. Again, I think we're being manipulated in a lot of ways by the press, by people who can afford to pay polls. paper polls.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people are often discouraged when they see these things. So I don't think it's helpful to see this kind of thing. I do think it would be helpful to have a national day of election.
Oh, yes.
I think it would be helpful to say, all right, today everybody is off. You need to go to the polls. You need to wave your flags. We'll have fireworks at the end of that. And if you've got an I voted sticker, then something wonderful will happen to you.
Well, sure. I mean, if you're an executive in a company, it's probably no big deal to take some time off and
That's
go
right.
vote.
That's right.
But people who work jobs, 9 to 5, it's a lot harder.
It is harder. And the thing is, we rail against the corporations who have the money to swing these races in their direction. And what I would say to voters, if we the people don't be the people and vote, then those corporations will end up taking our vote, and they will be the people then.
Yes. Well, this is our opportunity. Unfortunately, we're out of time for now. We'd like to thank our guest, Marihelen Wheeler. We'll be back next week after the election, and we look forward to seeing you then. And Marihelen, will you come back?
I would, anytime. This would be delightful fun.
Great.
Thank you.
If you haven't already voted, we'd like to encourage you to get to the polls tomorrow and support the candidates and issues of your choice, because that's the way democracy works. And thanks for joining us. This is Shamrock McShane for African Network TV.